It's Rick Hansen on Amazing Greats, the podcast. Thanks for joining us today. We are talking with a huge business guy and a huge follower of Jesus who shares how the two are not only non-compatible, they are critical to one another. In this success story, in turning around a failed company in just 15 years, based on his love of God and of people. He shares his wisdom and his inspiration in this episode of Amazing Greats. Well, thank you so much for being here today and to share your story with us, and just a few minutes to kind of find out who you are and what you're all about, and this amazing company that you've had an opportunity to build over the last couple of decades. So let me do a little brief introduction so that those who are not familiar with who you are, they will be.
Okay.
Bill Yeargin is a CEO of a company called Correct Craft. And that is the overall umbrella company for something like in the neighborhood of 21 brands of boat manufacturing pieces. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But not only that, you're the author of multiple books, including one that's just come out here just a couple months ago called Faith Leap. And we're going to talk about that. You had a book called Education of a CEO, which was like a bestseller. But not only that, let me read from the credentials here. You've done mission work in 120 countries, something like that. You're an outspoken follower of Jesus, which we love. And you were actually served on the Obama and Trump administrations in the cabinet level advisory boards, which makes you kind of this, national kind of figure in terms of politics. So you got it all. And it's good. So great to have you here today. So I always like to start with, where did all of this begin? Bill, as little Billy, as a young boy, tell us your Christian foundation.
Well, I was very fortunate, Rick, to grow up in a Christian family. Had a great mom and dad, and they were very engaged in our lives. They were very active in our church, and so really, really, very, very blessed, very, very fortunate. My dad, unfortunately, when I was in my 20s and he was in his 40s, I was in my early 20s. He got Parkinson's disease.
Mm.
Had a really rough time of it. 15 years, and he passed away from the disease. And it was very tough on our family, Rick. And for me personally, I never questioned my faith, but to be honest with you, I wondered why. Like, why the best guy that I ever knew, great husband, father, give his shirt off his back for anybody, deacon in the church. I mean, just really engaged. Why'd this happen to him? Such a good guy. And so it really got me digging into what is called apologetics, which is really, what's the evidence behind our faith? And so I spent a lot of years doing that and then just studying that and reading books about that. And then a couple of years ago, I thought, I need to share this. I need to share what I've learned. And I've got a unique platform through the business world of people that will listen to what I say that would never listen to a pastor.
Yeah.
That just, they'll listen to the CEO, but they'd never go in a church or listen to a pastor. So I wanted to use that platform to share the story. And that's really how we ended up with Faith League.
What was the period of time that kind of evaluation period? Was that multiple years in your 20s?
Yeah, well, actually, Dad got sick in my 20s. He was in my 30s when he passed away. So
Okay.
he was really, really late 30s. And it continues to this day. I mean, I still enjoy reading books about apologetics. And what I've come to learn, Rick, is that, our Christian faith, we can have rock solid confidence in our faith. And there's just so much supporting it. Now, the book's named Faith Leap. At the end of the day, we know what pleases God is faith. So, it's great that we have evidence, but he still wants us to have faith in him. And that's where we came up with the Faith Leap name. But there's just so much evidence that we can hang on to as Christians. So what I'm hoping to do with the book, Faith Leap, is just encourage people who may be questioning their faith, maybe doubting their faith, or people that think, well, I could never be a Christian, or I don't know why somebody would be a Christian. If they pick it up, they're going to see a lot of reasons why they should be.
So you go through all of this evidence, but the final chapter is faith leap. I mean, there is that leap at the end.
Yeah.
You can have all this evidence you want, but like you said, it requires faith. And that's what God
Yeah.
asks for. Yeah.
Yeah, and Hebrews 11, he tells us that the writer says it's impossible to please God without faith. And so I believe we get enough evidence that we can feel very comfortable in our faith, but still at the end of the day, he wants us to have faith. And so, it's like sometimes people say, why doesn't God just come up here in the sky and tell us that he's God? And well, that wouldn't require faith, right? And we know faith is what pleases him. So I think he's given us plenty of evidence, but left just enough out that it requires that faith leap.
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible. So let's jump back. Let's talk about Correct Craft for a bit, just
Sure,
because I think
sure.
that's such an amazing story. First of all, the story started before you with a family of believers who started this business, and I think one of their original mottos was building boat craft for God's glory, or something
Yeah,
close to that. That was the Maloon family, right? And
yeah,
that was Walter Maloon and his son Ralph. And this all
yeah.
started almost 100 years ago. Can you tell us a little bit about what you know about that story from before your time at Correct Craft?
It's an amazing story. Actually, I wrote a book about it called Making Life Better, the Correct Craft story. And I go through the whole 100 years. And we use that book a lot, to help tell our story. But it's a family lived in New Hampshire, decided to start fresh in Florida. They moved down. They were Christians, so they started a boat company in the 1925. So we're just a few months away from being a 100-year-old company.
Yeah.
And they had some real challenging times, during the 30s, during the 40s, World War II. They were asked to build the boats that the U.S. military was used to cross the Rhine River in World War II. In fact, in the military records, it's called the Miracle of Boats. I tell the whole story in the book, but the they had a real little bit of a problem with the military because they wouldn't work Sundays, and the military wanted them to work Sundays and they wouldn't do it. So the military eventually said, okay, but you better get the boats done that we've contracted you to build. They got them done a few days early and actually ended up building an extra 100. They went through a bankruptcy. They had a government auditor that was requiring them to pay a bribe. They wouldn't pay the bribe. And so the government auditor failed a bunch of boats. This was about 1960, put the company into bankruptcy. But then the company spent 20 years paying back every penny that was discharged during the bankruptcy.
Oh man, that's great.
Lots of stories like that. It's really amazing company. By the time I had come on board, though, there were a lot of problems. I came on board at the end of 2006, and I was the fifth CEO in 5 years, Rick. So the company was really struggling, and the family had gotten down to like the fourth generation, and it was a wonderful family. There's just a lot of disagreement about what should be done with the company. And fortunately, we were able to turn it around. We were a $40 million company in 2009, and last year we bumped up over $1 billion. So
Woo-hoo. Wow.
we've grown 25 times, in the last 15 years. So it's really an unheard of story, really amazing story. We got a great team, great coach, and building both the glory of God is still our mission statement.
Okay. Oh, that's cool. And right in your logo, it says making life better as part of
Yeah,
like who you are, which I
yeah.
love. So, but where did they find you and what possessed you? What possessed you to take on this, what appeared to be a huge headache? And did you have a vision for that?
Well, no, I didn't. I was running a company down in South Florida where I'd grown up, loved it. I was been there my entire life, been in South Florida my entire life. My family was there. I was active in my church. I was a chairman of the local hospice. I was on the university board, the university there. Just everything was good. And they tried to hire me to be the fourth CEO, and I walked away. I said, no, I'm not interested. So that guy lasted about a year. And then they came back to me again and said, we really believe you're the guy. And a couple things happened, Rick, that were just really God things, I mean, like really God writing in the sky kind of things. And had no intention, no real desire to move to Orlando and run the company. but felt like that's what I was supposed to do and went up there, and it was extremely difficult. It was a mess.
Yeah.
And it was very, very difficult. I mean, the first 9 months I worked from 7 in the morning till 9 at night. But interestingly, what really turned it around, the turning point, about 8 or 9 months after I started there, I took 25 employees to Mexico on a service trip to build a house for a homeless family. Everybody, Rick, thought I was crazy. I mean, they thought I was crazy, but we needed a culture turnaround, and that was a turning point for our company because at that point, Rick, everybody realized, hey, we've got a bigger purpose than just building boats. We're going to make life better. We're going to use our platform for good. We're going to serve people. And I've taken people, Rick, to Cambodia, Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, all across the Caribbean and Central America on service trips. And we just go and we serve. We'll work there several days, serve people, and they'll never be able to pay us back. We're not doing this because we think they're going to buy a boat or something. There are people that can never pay us back, but we're happy to serve, and that's become a big part of our culture.
Can we go back and just touch on those two things? You said you had a couple of goddish visions, if you will, or God speaks.
Yeah,
Can you speak specifically to what those were?
yeah. No, I'd be happy to. There were two things. One was we just built our dream house. My wife and I had my kids were into horses. We had gone to an area called Wellington in South Florida that's horse country. We built a beautiful house on multiple acres. We built this beautiful barn. We had four horses, and um, so that's where we thought we were going to be the rest of our life. Well, I talked to it when the fifth time their fifth CEO, I talked to a realtor friend of mine, and she said, Bill, this is really bad timing. Houses like this aren't selling right now. I don't think I could sell it for you quickly. And so I thought actually that was a sign that we were not supposed to go to Orlando. A few days later, Rick, and you're going to think I'm making this up, but it's the honest to goodness truth. Guy calls out of the blue, says he's moving to the area. He's looking at a house down the street. He loves our house. Might be for sale? And I said, well, possibly. I don't think so, but it might be. So my wife and I, we built the house. We knew how much we had in it. We wanted to make a little money on it. So we picked a price in our mind. We said, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could get this amount? And the guy came, he looked at the house out of the blue. I've never heard of anything like this. No for sale sign out front, nothing.
Hmm.
He comes and he looks at the house, Rick, and he offers us to the penny the amount of money that we wanted.
Whoa, wow.
So
Yeah.
I've never heard anything like that happen before. The second one was similar. My girls were homeschooled, and we had a full-time tutor that worked for our family. Her name was Pam, and she would she was working helping my wife tutor the girls, and we had committed to her for the next school year. This was like June. We committed to her for the next school year, and I told my wife, I said, listen, if we move to Orlando, I feel an obligation to pay this tutor because, she's given up other opportunities, you know. So I said, we're just gonna have to pay her. And it was a big number. I mean, it wasn't just a few dollars, it was a big number. And she called me the next day after I talked to my wife and asked to be released for her commitment. Something else had come up. And
Oh my
so
gosh.
and so we started thinking, I think this is God talking to us. I mean, two things that are just unheard of. I've never had anything like that happen to me. I've never even heard of anything like that. And both those things fell under, there's a bunch of other little things, but so
Yeah.
that's where I just man, maybe I'm supposed to go to Orlando.
I love it. And the fact that you were open to seeing that and realizing that this is really, God speak in a lot of ways. So that's so cool. So you get there, you start these mission trips. Now, you said it was kind of unheard of to just out of the blue, just 6 or 8 months later at a troubled company to start sending your crew and you to missions. But how did you select those people? Were they all already Christians or not so much or both?
It was volunteer. And we've done a lot of service trips, and we we don't do evangelistic service trips. We do service in the sense of we're building a house, working in an orphanage, because I want everybody to feel comfortable going, whether or not you share a faith. If you want to serve, now they're often faith-related organizations, like an orphanage. We may go work in an orphanage. It may be a faith-related orphanage, but we're not asking anybody to, do anything that's going to make them uncomfortable. And so, and it's had such a huge impact on us, Rick. I really just can't overstate this because we go and we serve, and it has a huge impact on the people we're serving. Because when we bring a crew of 25, we brought up to 100 people on some of these service trips. These are boat builders, these are engineers, designers. They can go into a school or an orphanage or a community center and have a big impact. I mean, a really big, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so, but the thing that's great about it, sometimes people will be a little critical of me and they'll say, why are you spending all this money to fly all these people to Africa or Haiti or wherever you're going? Why don't you just send the money down there and let them pay to do it? Well, that's great. And that might be more efficient, but I want to serve people in these places where we're going to serve, but I also want to have an impact on our own people. So that first trip to Mexico, it was a horrible situation. It was 110 degrees all week. We're working building this house. The house is over next to the city sewage collection area. We can hardly breathe. We're taking showers, Rick, by taking lake water, pouring it over our head, soaping up and taking lake water and rinsing off. But you know what, Rick? At the end of those few days, those 25 employees, we gathered to regroup after the trip. They said things like, best few days of my life.
Oh,
I
wow.
can't wait to do anything so impactful. So the service trips have helped a lot of people all over the world, but they're having a huge impact on our team too, because people are seeing the benefit of service and they're going home and they're sitting at their kitchen tables and they're telling their kids the story about the trip. And it's inspiring the kids to say, I want to do something like that someday. So that's why we do it the way we do it. We're philanthropic. Almost every day, somebody asks me for money because they know we're philanthropic, but we focus all of our philanthropy on projects where our employees can participate. And it's had a big impact on our culture.
So amazing. When you serve, it's not just investing in that community and investing in that family that you're serving or whatever. As you say, it's investing in your own company, in your own people, and it serves a dual purpose. So amazing.
Yeah,
That's crazy. That's good. So the culture at Correct Craft is paramount
mhm.
to this turnaround that happened in 15 years, making this company, just completely turned around and blossoming. So can you just identify? I know there's a whole lot of things. You wrote a book about it, Education of a CEO, but can you just give us a thumbnail of what the culture at Correct Craft is all about?
Sure. The short version is we start off with a mission of building boats to the glory of God. Out of that flows our why. We call our why. Why do we exist? We exist to make life better. So we want to make life better on all kinds of people, our employees, our customers, of course, but we want to make life better on people that never be able to pay us back. Some of these service trips. Basically, we want to, everybody we come in contact with, we want to make their life better because they've been in contact with us. And then below that becomes three pillars of people, performance, and philanthropy. So we want to invest in people, our people, and other people. We want to invest in philanthropy, and we want to be a very high performing company. So we are, sometimes people get confused on this because they think, well, if you're a philanthropic organization and you want to help people, you shouldn't be worried about, having the best business results. But I tell people, in fact, I told a group of employees just a couple hours ago in a meeting, we can't do the things we want to do philanthropically. We can't invest in our people without being very high performing. So it's a false choice to say that you either have to be philanthropic minded or performance minded. In fact, you can't have the philanthropy without the performance. So
Yeah.
and there's all kinds of pieces, below that, but that's sort of the short version for you of our
That's
culture.
perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I would recommend that folks, if they want some more in-depth information about all of that, that they check out that book for sure. That one you wrote a few years ago, right? The Education of a CEO.
Yeah, Education CEO was about 3 years ago, and it was Rick. It was about what we've learned as a company through going through the horrible mess we were in at first, then going through the Great Recession, and then growing so quickly. From growing 25 times in 15 years. That's almost unheard of. So all that growth, just the things that we've learned. So Education of a CEO dives deep into some of these cultural issues that we're talking about.
So you have, in the neighborhood, maybe the figure I saw was around 2,000 plus employees overall
Yes,
in
sir.
all of the various companies that Correct Craft
Yeah.
owns.
Yep.
Of those 2,000 employees, is there a high percentage that are Christian, or do you even know?
So there's no faith requirement to work here. There's no requirement other than you be qualified to do the job. But I tell you, we have a lot of employees who really embrace the learning that we offer, really embrace the opportunity to serve. Because once they do it, they say things like "best few days of my life." I mean, they can't wait to do it again, and because they realize just how just how satisfying it is. That all the studies that have been done on what makes us happy, Rick, tells us that it's not about being selfish. It's not about trying to make ourselves happy. It's about being selfless and serving others and helping others.
Another interesting piece of the culture, again, I'm sure is doesn't involve everybody, but you do a Bible study, a regular
Yep.
Bible study. Does it happen at
Yep.
workplace or what?
Yeah, every one of our companies, they have a voluntary Bible study. They have somebody locally that we're spread out across the country. But they have somebody locally who teaches it. It's purely voluntary. We just want to offer people an opportunity if they want to do this, that they can do it. And we don't twist anybody's arms. We don't force anybody. We don't even, we're not going to pressure anybody. Just people know it's available. If you want to join us, you can do it.
Do you sense that there's in the midst of all of that, there is a certain amount of conversion? Have you heard stories of people
Oh
who,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah. Yeah, plenty of them. And we're not, again, I really can't overemphasize this because for anybody who's listening and is thinking, wow, I need to do that at my company, we want people to be enticed by what we do because we operate with integrity. We treat people fairly. We love on people who need to be loved on, not because we're trying to pressure. We're not trying to use our platform to pressure anybody to believe or think anything, but we do want to demonstrate that we love people and that we're going to operate with integrity and we're going to make good decisions, based on our values. And then hopefully they'll think, wow, I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
just modeling who you are
Yeah.
creates the opening of the door to find out more, which is I think that's what Jesus was telling us to do, right? Just
Yeah, no, and I've done a zillion interviews over the last 15 years, and people often ask, well, how do you separate, you as a Christian and you as a CEO? And I said, I can't. That's just who I am. You
yeah.
know, I'm a Christian and I am a CEO. I don't even try to separate the two. Now, I understand there's times I need to be focused on business. There's times that, I can be focused on faith. I also, I'm sure you've gotten the impression already. I just very strongly believe that people have a right to choose. Jesus never pressured anybody. He told the story, he gave an opportunity. If they wanted to walk away, they could walk away. You don't hear Jesus saying, hey, come back and, pressuring people. And that's so we're going to do what we're told to do. We're going to share a story and we're going to love on people and care about them and try to make their life better. And if we're a good example and they want to learn more about our faith, we're happy to tell them that too.
Well, in the whirly swirly, profit-oriented world of business, there also has got to be, especially in a turnaround situation where you really got to make some tough choices. How
Yeah.
do you go about doing the tough stuff? The firings, the
Yeah.
reorganizing, the all of those
Yeah.
things. How does a Christian leader handle those situations?
That's a great question, Rick. We hopefully do it with care and love. We have it creates some confusion sometimes because if we have to terminate an employee. I mean, I've had wives call me, and I say wives because the calls I've gotten are from wives, call me and say, well, you can't be a good company. You fired my husband. And, but it comes back to without performance, we can't do any philanthropy. And so, I've got, 2,000 families that I feel a sense of responsibility for, Rick. And if I let people come in and not do their job, and I let them get away with stuff because I care about them and I love them and I do, but I'm hurting 2,000 families. And the best thing I can do for our employees is make sure for the next 25 years, if they want to be with us, they've got a great company that cares about them, is going to take care of them, and going to try to make the right choices. And so we do have to make tough choices. It's excruciatingly hard. But if we're not willing to do that, we can't do all the good things.
Beyond the traumatic period in your 20s when your father passed away and kind of questioning what's that all about, were there other kind of faith challenges for you along the way where you said, where's God now?
I mean, there's been, tough moments where I've gone through different things, different challenges, but what I went through with dad was exponentially larger than any of those. As I said, I was very fortunate. I've always had a lot of, Christian support. My mom's 88. I talk to her every day. I know she's praying for me. I've always had that support there. So, I mean, I've had challenges just like we all do, with family and health and, professional challenges, but nothing that even is even close to my dad's, story, which really was a catalyst.
Let's leap into Faith Leap
Yeah,
and
sure.
talk a little bit more specifics about that, of the various evidences that you uncovered of that validate your belief in Christianity. Is there one that is stands out as being the one that is, maybe more impactful on you than others?
Yes, in the book, there's several chapters, and every chapter is really a different evidence. And I start out with proving, why I believe there's a God, why there's proof of God, and then why it's Jesus. I mean, the huge evidence, of course, is the resurrection. And so, the question that people come up with is, okay, well, how do you prove the resurrection? How do you prove that really happened? And when you dig into it, Rick, I believe there's more proof of the resurrection than almost anything from distant history that we believe. And you look at, you know, there were 500 witnesses that saw Jesus he was, after he was crucified, 500 eyewitnesses. You look at conversion stories like the Apostle Paul. He was killing people and he was, putting people in prison that were Christians. He saw Jesus alive after he was crucified, and then became arguably the second or third most influential Christian ever. You look at the apostles, the disciples becoming apostles, that, when Jesus was crucified, they were all in hiding. They were scared to death. The boldest of the disciples, Peter, denied Jesus 3 times. They were scared. They thought they were going to be next. But after the resurrection, they're boldly preaching on the streets. That so if you look back through, secular history, nobody disagrees that Jesus was a person who grew up in Nazareth, had a ministry in Galilee, was crucified, and everybody agrees something big happened a few days after, Jesus was crucified. Nobody disagrees on anything up to the crucifixion. Some people say, well, the disciples stole the body. Well, that couldn't have happened because, it just, it was guarded. Some people say he woke up after being asleep, sick. Well, he was crucified. You're not going to just wake up and push a stone away, fight off Roman guards, and go have this impact. So something big happened that changed the disciples. Then the other thing is, you got to remember the disciples that became apostles, all but one of them died for their faith. Rick, people don't die for a lie. If you and I decided we were going to come up with some hoax and we were going to tell somebody some story that didn't happen and it took off and people started believing it, and you and I agreed we're not going to tell anybody. Well, if I get arrested and they tell me, hey, Bill, we're going to give you a lethal injection and kill you, if you don't deny this story. No offense, Rick, but I'm confessing. You know,
I
so
understand.
but they didn't. They died for it. They could have confessed and saved their lives, but they were willing to die for it because they had seen Jesus. And once you've seen a resurrected Jesus, you're going to be bold. You're going to be willing to die for it. And then even the secular Roman historian Josephus, who was lived in the household of the emperor, a secular historian that had no motivation to promote Christianity. Even he writes, and you can look in his book, The Antiquities, or his writings, The Antiquities, you can Google this. He writes that Jesus was a wonder worker. In other words, he did miracles. And he writes that the disciples claimed to have seen him alive 3 days after he was resurrected, and then it changed their lives and started a faith that we know as Christianity. He's writing this 60 years later after Jesus rose. So, there's plenty of eyewitnesses, there's changed lives, there's martyrdom, there's secular writers that wrote about this. So once you get over, did Jesus rise from the dead? Well, then okay, it all gets sort of easier from there because if you can acknowledge that, then but there's other things. There's the good that's been done. There's the philosophy. There's the consistency of the Bible. There's prophecy that's fulfilled. You start looking at all this stuff. It's like, there's no question in my mind that Jesus was God, he was resurrected, and what's written in the Bible is true. There's a lot of evidence.
You must be familiar with Lee Strobel. Lee
Yeah,
Strobel,
of
the
course, the case
journalist.
for Christ. I've read his book.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He did a case for Christ. He did a case for heaven, the case for faith, the case for miracles. He's all about apologetics, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so
I've
that's
read his
kind of
stuff.
his
Yeah,
story. As a journalist, he felt compelled to dig deep into the details of all of that to come up with a legitimate case in all of these cases because he was an atheist prior to that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
He's a great writer. And there's a number of really good books. The Josh McDowell stuff. It's about the time Lee Strobel, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. There's a great new book that just came out a year or two ago. It says I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. That covers a lot of these
Yeah.
same things too.
Our whole premise for the Amazing Greats podcast is just that. We don't talk with pastors about things. We're not looking for a teacher or a preacher on our podcast. We're looking for people who have got great career stories, whether it be acting or authors or musicians or athletes, and also happen to have a strong faith in God and in Jesus Christ as their Savior. So, exactly. I mean, you're the perfect guest to have on our
Oh
show.
wow, you made my day. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I did notice, I couldn't help but notice that the foreword was written by Brant Hansen, who was also a guest on this podcast a while back, and his producer on another episode was Sherry Lynn.
Yeah,
How is it
yeah.
that you know Brant Hansen, the radio guy?
Brent and I are good friends. We met 20 years ago when he was working at a radio station in West Palm Beach. And it started when my daughter's interned. He had an intern for the morning. My daughter's interned on his show. And we just hit it off and started becoming friends, started doing things with our families. And he and his wife and my wife and I get together from time to time. And he's a really good friend who, has we've been friends now for 20 plus years. And so, he's obviously, his book Unoffendable sold hundreds of thousands of copies. I mean, he's, very successful author, radio DJ. I think he's on like 250 stations. So I felt, to be honest with you, my friendship's more important to me with Brant than being able to use his fame or, the people that know him to promote the book. So I almost didn't ask him, but he read the book. He gave me some comments, and just before it was written, a pre-publication version, he gave me some comments. I made some changes.
Do any of your missions coincide with what his missions are? I know he goes all around the world as well, visiting, is it Compassion International?
Cure,
Cure. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he's with Cure, and I think he's their storyteller. I think is his title, but he shares the Cure story. And I've not had the opportunity to go to him with him to one of the cure hospitals, but I'd love to do that someday. I'm sure we'll get the opportunity at some point. And he's got some amazing stories of, kids that have got no hope. I mean, these are people that are the cure is taken care of, that they honestly just have no hope. And Cure goes in and does some great things for them and helps those kids and adults. And so it's really great work they're doing.
Yes, indeed. So let's jump right back into the book, and then I got to let you go here too, because I know your time is very valuable, and you're a busy, busy guy, and you're promoting a book and building a company, and my goodness. But the question is, I guess the final question would be, what would you hope that either non-Christians, and I know you kind of mentioned this in the end of the book, what you would hope non-Christians might take away from this book, Faith Leap, and what Christians might take away from the book.
Thank you, Rick. That's a great question. I'll start with Christians. Christians, I want to help solidify their faith. I want to help them, be encouraged in their faith. And my hope is that they'll read the book and think, wow, I'm really solid in my faith. What do I do? What should I do? Really encourage them to be more engaged with their faith. And then my recommendation at the end of the book is, as Christians, we need to do two things. One is we need to just share a story. And a lot of people get nervous about that, Rick, because they say, well, I haven't been trained in evangelism, or, I don't know what to do. But, for almost the first 2,000 years of Christianity, there was no evangelism training. You just told your story, right?
Hmm.
And so, that's what I encourage people to do, just tell their story. And part of that is inviting. There's a guy named Ryan Burge, who is probably the chief data researcher, trend forecaster, trend analyzer for Christian faith topics in the world. Lives in the Midwest and works at a university there. And he can tell you every county in the country, how many people go to church, how many people don't, why they don't go to church. It's really amazing. And he said, I was with him a few weeks ago in New York City, and he said that most people who are not in church would be receptive to being part of a faith community if they're invited by a friend or somebody they trust. So I tell people, just invite somebody, just invite somebody, even if you're not comfortable, say, hey, I got this church I really like. Would you mind going with me one Sunday? Would you like to go with me one Sunday? And then the second thing Christians need to first is share their story, and second, just love others. I love the story in the Gospels where the Pharisees were trying to trick Jesus, Rick, and they took the Old Testament law, which was obviously very important to the Jews, said, okay, which one of these is more important? And Jesus said, you want to get it right. I'm paraphrasing a little. He said, if you want to get it right, you do two things: love God, love others. But what's interesting, when I started digging into that a few years ago, we all know how to love others, right? Be kind, help people who need help. But when you think, how do I love God? And I started digging into this, and it's really interesting because we know the story of Peter, where Jesus kept asking Peter if he loved him. And Jesus said, if you love me, feed my sheep. Take care of people, his
Hmm.
sheep, people, okay? And then the other verse, right before Jesus was crucified, he's talking to the disciples, and he said, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you visited me in prison, and a couple other things. And the disciples said, they were confused because they said, well, we never did any of those things. What are you talking about? And Jesus said, when you do any of these things for someone else, you're doing it for me. And so, how do we love God? We love God by loving others. And
Hmm.
so it's so interesting. So, I tell people, share your story, love others. If you're not a Christian, it's more than, the Bible teaches us that we're saved by faith. In Ephesians chapter 2, um, Paul writing to the Church of Ephesus is really clear. It's not about our good works. If you ask most people, why are you a Christian? They'll say, well, I'm a good person. I've never killed anybody. My grandpappy was a Christian. I go, well, what makes you a Christian is having faith. It's not, anything we do, it's having faith. And that's the faith leap, and say, okay, I got all this information. I realize there's lots of evidence that Christianity exists, but you got to take that faith. It's more you get it out of your head and take that faith leap. So those would be my advice.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. God bless you and have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you, Rick. It's an honor to be with you.
Incredible. A truly humble, powerful leader who uses his faith foundation to build the culture of $1 billion company that operates in 21 brands and has an impact in 70 countries around the world. Bill Yeargin, thank you so much for your time on Amazing Greats. God bless.